Simulation Happy Hour acknowledges the land and the waters from which you are listening today. Welcome to Simulation Happy Hour. Sit back, relax, and let's talk about all things sim.
Hi, I'm Jenny Bassett.
And I'm Jane Frost.
And I'm here today to have a chat with Jane about a blended learning interactive simulation suite, otherwise known as the BLISs suite. So Jane, I think the name's just beautiful, but can you give us some insight to what is a blended learning interactive simulation suite?
Yeah, I love talking about the BLISs suite. We have the first one in Australia, and the suite is, as it suggests, blended learning. So think of a 360-degree room or space, but the walls are interactive. So you can press on the walls and make things happen. So it's like having a 360 touch screen that you can immerse people into and really create those immersive simulations.
Also, for learners in there and they want to use a piece of equipment, can they touch the screen or the wall and the equipment works? Or can you explain that a bit more? Or does it change scenes?
So it depends how you build it, but if you build hotspots on the walls, then you can press on those and they are interactive, so that they could pop up a video. They could be, so you can move things around the room if you wanted to. You can actually click on like an EMR and it will pop up with the notes, but it will also come up with an x-ray that you can then move over to a display box, and you can then draw on that so that you can say which part of the x-ray you're concerned about. Similarly, you can do that with an ECG, so you can draw on the walls as well. It's like having your own, because it's an interactive wall, you can circle things as you would do on like an iPad or something like that. However, it's because you can have people in the room, it makes it more interactive for learners, because you can say, okay, so would you like to tell me whereabouts on this ECG you're concerned about? And then you can actually pull up a 360 or a 3D model of the heart, and you can rotate it in the room so you can actually see where it sits and what that would look like. So it does depend. It's very versatile. It depends on what you're trying to achieve in the simulation, but you can go through anatomy and physiology, but align that with patient care, ECGs, all of those kind of things. But you can also use it for an interactive background for a simulation. So you can do a multimodal simulation and have mannequins in the room with the background making it more realistic. Would you like me to give you an example?
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out how big is the room, because yes, if you can get a mannequin and a bed in there, it must be a fairly big room, is it?
So our room was converted from a single sim space. So think of the rooms where you put your high fidelity mannequin and you have the viewing station. We converted one of those into our BLISs room. So it's a reasonable size room, but you could probably only get about 5 or 6 students in there to do an activity. You can get more in otherwise, but if you're wanting them to engage with the walls and actually do a simulation, then you're probably looking at 4 or 5 students in there to actually do things. When we have run a simulation where because we are a faculty of health, we have other disciplines. So we partnered with our paramedicine colleagues, and we ran a simulation. And you'll like this, Jenny, because we use MaskEd as well.
Great.
So we had a MaskEd character in the room, and the walls showed that the character had a fall by the side of the road. So the walls showed the traffic rushing past. It was just as if they'd fallen by the side of the road. The paramedic students had to come in and look after the person, and then we were able to progress it so that the next time the room became at the back of an ambulance, and you were able to do what you needed to do in the back of the ambulance. And there was interactive, so you could press on the wall to get the vital signs would come up, and you could press on for the equipment that you would need, and that they would be available. You then opened the back of the ambulance, which was another hotspot, which took us to another sequence, and that was taking the patient into the hospital and handing over the patient to the nursing staff. So when we moved to that, we were able to have display on the wall there, handover. So they use a different acronym. It's not ISBAR, it's I missed, I believe. And we could have that so that if they wanted to, they could click on the wall, see that come up, and then they were reminded on how to articulate that handover. We then had student nurses take that handover and progress to looking at the patient, and they went through a series of, so they had an x-ray, they had blood gases, they had all of things available to them, all while caring for a patient, but the room changed so that it became this immersive environment, and it was interactive, so you could really get those things like the ECG were available there to go, okay, so you've done an ECG, here it is, let's have a look at it, what do we think is happening? So it gave that sequence that made it more realistic. It wasn't just like saying to them, okay, so pretend you're in the back of an ambulance now. It was the visuals were all there. We were able to make that happen, and we were able to have things that they would need in the room available for students.
Wow, how exciting. That sounds fantastic. Very immersive.
It was really good to see that sequence and to have that interactivity. I think we've started to play with other, shouldn't say play, should I? But you know what I mean. We've started to
play.
Look at,
Yeah, it is a play.
yes. It is to play with other ways of creating content. So one of the other things that I've done in the Bliss room is create an escape room. So you can actually click on the wall and answer questions, as well as it's timed. It can do all the gamification side of things. So if you don't complete the room and get all the questions, well, if you don't complete the room in 2 minutes, then it will, essentially say that you didn't escape that room and you lose marks for going through. And that really gamifies learning. So we did that around burns management, and they were able to learn about burns while they were doing this interactive activity, and then they answered a few questions to make sure they'd got the key points, and they were displayed all around the room, so it was more of a team involved in answering the questions, and everybody got into the spirit of can we do this better than our colleagues, and things like that. So really
which
interactive.
made it fun, and learning should be fun. So let's I love the example that you've given us, Jane, and I want to know a bit more about it. So there was a pre-brief for the students, and they'd done a bit of learning about those topics, and then they came into the simulation room, and then they did the simulation, and then is there a debrief on the other end of it? Can you give us a bit, like, was this a 1 hour session or a 2 hour session? Can you give us a bit more information around that example?
Of course. So you mean the example with the paramedic students, that one?
Yes.
Or the escape room? Yeah. Okay. So with the paramedic student, there was a pre-brief. So it was, we want you to care for this patient, and then you're going to hand over. So we really talked through how to use the room, because if you're not aware of how interactive the walls are, you can miss that out. So you have to, with any new technology, familiarize people to the functionality of how things can work and what is possible. Otherwise, they would miss things like the vital signs, because they didn't know that they could press a wall. So there is a pre-brief around the scenario, but there's also that familiarization of the technology. And then, right. Yes, a debrief afterwards about how that went, how they went from the point of view of their single disciplines, but also an interprofessional debrief, so that we could really learn with, from, and to each other. Is that right? Those are the words, aren't they?
Nice. Yeah. So, sorry, I'm going off all. I know we had some pre-prepared questions, but I'm so excited about the Bliss Room. I wanted to know, how many people does it take to, how many staff? So have you got academic in the room? Who else? What other staffing have you got to run the Bliss Room?
So we have invested in having a technician who can help us with the running of the room. Previously, it was the academics that were invested in, and the academics and researchers who wanted to use the room, that were involved in setting it up and being able to create the scenarios. So I guess I should mention that the way that we got the room is through research infrastructure and a grant that was more than just about teaching and learning. It was about using technology for change. So we have a project called the Western Change Lab, and the Bliss was just a part of that bigger umbrella of research. So we are using it for research as well as looking at teaching and learning research now to see how it is received.
And so there's some published papers, Jane, that the listeners can go and find?
Not yet. We've only had the room for almost a year, so it takes a little bit longer than that to publish, I'm afraid.
It does.
Yeah, we needed to create but there is certainly work being developed, and it will come out very shortly.
Great. All right. Well, if you can let us know, we'll probably put that up on the Sim Happy Hour website for listeners once that's available. But yeah, can't wait to read, the students' experience and technology, because I think that's something that academics are working with on a day-to-day basis now, around not only with simulation but with AI and all that. So interesting. It's interesting that you've got a dedicated person to run that room. So fantastic. Well,
I guess the other thing that I was just going to mention that the other good thing about the Bliss Room, I think, is that we now have another couple of sites that have got Bliss Rooms, but also there are people who have Bliss Rooms in the UK who are partnering with us to do some research, so that there is this international sort of network of Bliss Rooms who are keen to share what they have developed and to connect. And I think that's what's really fabulous about simulation, is that the people that you meet and those connections that you make, and then you go, hey, I've got this idea, and they go, well, we've got one of those rooms as well, so why don't we partner? And so I think those kind of things are what's really nice about the simulation community as a whole.
Yeah, nice. Well, I think you've answered probably the next two questions. The next one I really wanted to ask was, how does the interactive 360-degree environment help students apply theory to practice? I think you've given us an example, but can you give us a bit more information around that theory to practice transition?
Yeah, so it's not, so the room that we have is actually 270 rather than 360, because we do have as I mentioned before, it was in the single sim room, so we do have that control room.
Yep.
So that people can, so that side is not, it doesn't have the interactivity, and it does not have things displayed, but because it has that wraparound feel of it, it really immerses you into the environment and gives you more of a realistic feel. So I think sometimes we try and create scenarios where we all have CPUs or clinical practice units, labs, whatever your institution calls them. And most of those are hospital based. If you want to create a scenario with a primary care or in a patient's home, it's harder to do that in a 6-bedded ward that's been set up to do clinical skills. What this gives you is the ability to be able to change that that scene that goes around, and to be able to give people clues about how patients, so about patients' stories and patients' lives, rather than taking them out of their own environment, putting them into a hospital, which, you know, a lot of our nurses will go, or a lot of our students will become nurses in a hospital, but it is important that they remember, or that they show an interest in patients as a whole. So I think being able to have those different scenarios and really think about what might be going on for that patient, and think about why you're asking some of the questions. So, you know,
as a primary healthcare nurse, I was going, oh, this would be great, because I look after a lot of my patients in a primary healthcare setting. And the other setting, which I think is big in healthcare, is mental health care. And so that's not always in the acute care setting. So I can see, you know, the beauty of the application in being able to easily change the environment without having to do a whole heap of moving of furniture and investment in room after room after room to create a level of immersion for students. So it sounds exciting.
I think with the learning that there's more to just the environment, though, because you can then make it so if you're in that scenario and you can see that there's some confusion about the anatomy and physiology or the pathophysiology of the disease, you can actually bring that up and then explain that too. So it has that ability to sort of really allow the facilitator to draw on lots of different applications and really build that into a scenario so that you can understand, you know, what AF looks like in the heart while you're caring for somebody who has AF. So you could actually get that up on one screen, or and really explore what's going on and why the drug would work and things like that.
So it really does support the students' cognition, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it allows them to make those connections and really understand how the body is working, because you can pull up a picture of and you can basically dissect the heart on the screen, so that you can go, this is what's happening here. This is the bit that's compromised. So how would we go forward?
Yes. So I suppose that leads me into the next question. So how does the BLISs suite support decision-making, teamwork, and confidence before students enter the real clinical environment? Has that been part of your research? Are you able to share that with us before publication, or will we wait for the publication?
Well, look, there's a lot of elements there, Jenny. I can perhaps talk to some of my observations so far, but because teamwork is clear from like the escape rooms that we have done, you can see that people need to work as a team and really pull together to go, okay, is this the right answer? Where, you know, how am I going to do that? So I think it can foster that teamwork. I think having any added realism helps with their confidence going into clinical practice and preparing them for a real scenario. If you can make it as true to life as possible. So when we first got the room, we had a lot of images from the UK, which work, but perhaps don't necessarily represent Australian healthcare. So what we've actually been able to do is get a videographer to go out and video some actual healthcare spaces in local health districts that they can, so we can now have that so that it actually looks like the hospital that they're going to go into, and you can see what's happening. So I think from that preparedness, I think it has a lot to offer. one of the things that we have been thinking about is, you could even have people who are worried about going into hospital to come in and actually show them what it's like in a hospital and sort of try and help with those fears. People who have anxiety about what's going to happen, all of those things could actually be shown in the bliss room. So sort of work that we're thinking could be done in those spaces is not only for teaching and learning, but is really to help people who have, don't understand what it's going to be like in an environment.
Yeah, that's a great application for the facility. So, has it got like large data banks, Jane? Because you're talking about people going out and doing videos and things. So, have you had to increase the data or the storage of data, or does that come in the unit?
So you do need a server for it, but that comes with the setup of the room.
Yeah, nice. Oh, yeah, just sorry, I know that wasn't a question we thought about, but I was like going, I come up with all these extra questions for you. Sorry. Okay. So
ask me anything, Jenny.
Well, it's just us having a chat. So, what other ways do you think that the Bliss Room allows students to engage with simulated patients and clinical data in real time? Have you got some other applications that you can share with the listeners in the way you've been using the Bliss Room?
Well, I guess the example that I gave when you're transitioning somebody through different parts of the healthcare system really allows students to see that and work with simulated patients in that area. I know simulated patients and MaskEd are different. We don't have any simulated patients, so I'm going to so MaskEd is my only way to answer that question. But I think that transition through helps the students. And I've kind of forgotten what your question was now, Jenny. So do you want to ask it again?
That's all right. No. Well, it was around how does the Bliss Room allow students to engage in the clinical data in real time? I think you've when they're touching the wall and they can actually open something up, to me, that's a game changer.
Yes. And you can actually have, so any monitors or anything you can have that will change in real time. So you program them in there. You can have the ECG. You could have an ECG machine if you wanted to, or you could just have the result that would pop up it when you needed it to. So I think its limitation is only what you think of to be able to put in there. It's about sort of thinking about what might be useful and programming it in there, but there is the flexibility within the system just to be able to hop out and go to the internet and open up a page that has the relevant information.
Mm.
And it comes with a library of the pathophysiology and some anatomy and physiology that you can use that's already there. So that's really useful as a reference point to be able to go, okay, this isn't the point of today, or maybe it is. We have created some scenarios with ECG interpretation, which was really good to be able to see the waves actually displayed in the different parts of the QRS complex in the heart, and be able to have that up on the screen and for it to be animated and you could see what was happening. So resources like that are really good for that connection.
Yeah, nice. So how important do you think that this simulation technology like the Bliss Room is in preparing students for complex healthcare situations?
Look, I think it's a game changer for complex situations because you can add in noise, other things that are distractors around a scenario, and you can make that background realistic so that you're taking a mannequin and a mannequin simulation that might be great. And I'm not saying that the Bliss Room will replace any other, but it's a great way to augment any simulation, really, to add that layer of realism you perhaps don't need. The high fidelity mannequin, you could use a lower fidelity mannequin in the room, because you can add the other functionalities and the elements in the room to be able to do that. So yeah, I really do think that it adds, takes it to another level, and really allows that complex situation to be dissected in a way so that you can look at different parts of the simulation. You could actually have a video of their relative. You could bring it back to being about the person. So you could be doing, an arrest or something, and you could then also have the relative in a video of the relative in the waiting room that you have to then go and talk to, or a phone call or something that really adds those elements of real life that we aren't able to sort of simulate in other ways.
Yes, yeah. I think it's got some great opportunities. I'm interested to see what comes next in the Bliss Suite. And I suppose, Jane, probably our last question, because you've answered a lot of the others that were here on our little list. But what impact do you hope that the Bliss Room will have on student learning and patient outcomes in the long term?
Look, I hope that the Bliss Room will better prepare our graduates and really allow them not only to understand the pathophysiology and make good clinical decisions, but also to recognise patients as people, and to be able to bring in that patient-centeredness or the human aspect to care, because I think this allows you to be able to add those elements that perhaps when you're focused on a skill or a way of doing things that needs to happen, that we often forget, or students often forget as they're prioritizing, okay, which drug do I need to give next? They're forgetting that that's a person, and to be able to bring that side of things in, I think that our nurses will be better graduates, and I would like to be cared by someone, and it's not that far off, Jenny, that when I need caring for, or when I go into hospital, I'd like them to see me for me and not just my disease. And I think that's what the Bliss Room will be able to do.
Yeah, nice. So I think could be touching on your research here, but if you're able to, can you share with us what's been the feedback from students and your staff so far?
So we've not had as many students through as we would have liked so far, because it is a research space rather than totally dedicated for teaching and learning at this point. Yep. But the resources that we've made from the Bliss Room, because one of the things I didn't mention, but we have it Zoom enabled so that you can actually be in the room and Zoom it to another classroom, because that allows it scalability.
Yes.
And the feedback that we've had from those kind of interactions have been very positive. And as I've mentioned before, the escape room has been nothing but fun and interactive. They've really learnt things from being in that environment, even when they didn't really realise they were learning elements. They've come out going, oh, right, yes, well, that was the rule of nines. Oh, yeah. And they understood it a bit better from being in those environments. So, yeah.
Nice. Now, are there any questions that I haven't asked? Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us about the Bliss Room? Because I think you've also answered the one about where you might see it evolving in the future. You've talked about some interdisciplinary simulations. Are there any other applications you can see coming or on the drawing board that you're able to share with us at this point?
Look, I think it's important that we don't train nurses in silos and that we do engage in that interprofessional education. So I think that's important. I do understand, and certainly where I work, it has a huge undergraduate cohort. So it is hard to do interprofessional education, but I think the Bliss Room lends us to innovative ways of being able to do that. And that's what I'd like to be able to see, that we can have everybody have access to this type of technology to really help with that learning and to engage the learners and the students that we have.
Yeah, nice. Well, thanks for the chat today, Jane. Now, you don't get out of our chat without, if for this week, if you could be anywhere in the world having a drink, where would you be and what would your drink be this week?
Now, do you know what, Jenny? I'd forgotten all about this question, so I hadn't really pre-prepared it. But I think I would like to be in Italy.
Yes.
Having an Aperol Spritz, I think.
Nice.
Would be
Lovely.
Yes.
Well, thanks for our chat today, Jane. I've really enjoyed that, and thanks for giving us some insight around how your university's been using the Bliss Suite and what's coming next. I'll certainly be keeping an eye out for the research. So thanks for the chat today.
Thanks, Jenny.